ואז אני שואל את הבחור בקצה, מהגולן, מה...
Welcome to US Army News YouTube channel. Tensions in the Middle East made Lebanon a day from hell today. Hezbollah has long been a target of Israel because of its support for Hamas. Various IDF operations have failed to stop Hezbollah's aggression. On top of all this, today, Israel meticulously carried out a crushing operation against Hezbollah. Let's take a look at what happened. Today, the IDF opened fire on southern Lebanon. At first light, Hezbollah woke up to a hellish day. Israel launched airstrikes on the town of Gaza on the southern outskirts of Sidon, about 30 kilometers, 19 miles from the northern border. These attacks were very violent. Large fireballs and clouds of smoke could be seen from the areas where the strikes took place. Lebanon's state-run national news agency, NNA, reported that 14 people in the country were wounded in Israeli airstrikes near Sidon earlier today. The agency said the strikes targeted a warehouse and a factory where tires and electricity generators are produced. Most of those injured were Syrian and Palestinian workers. Shortly after the attack, the IDF issued a statement. IDF spokesman, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, said that the Israeli army was behind the massive airstrikes near Sidon in Lebanon earlier today. Hagari said the strikes targeted weapons depots belonging to the Hezbollah terror group. Hagari said the strikes came in response to a Hezbollah drone loaded with explosives, striking an open area near the northern town of Arbel this morning. Lebanon reported that 2 emergency responders were injured while extinguishing a fire in the warehouse. A Lebanese security source explained that everyone was very scared in this attack, because this attack was so powerful that it made the whole city tremble. The attacks did not end there. The IDF announced that it had struck a Hezbollah position in the Mervahin area of South Lebanon, where many members of the group were gathered. This was a slap in the face to Hezbollah after the morning attack. The IDF first said that intelligence and intelligence-gathering units of the 146th Division had detected Hezbollah operatives entering the area earlier today. Immediately after this discovery, the army called for airstrikes. A little later, the IDF released footage of airstrikes on Hezbollah sites near Maiz al-Jabal and Odessa in southern Lebanon. The IDF is working relentlessly to put an end to the attacks of its enemies. On the other hand, international mediators, as we know, have been trying for a long time to find a diplomatic solution to prevent war between Israel and Hezbollah. After all this effort, the international mediators are considering bringing in Qatar as the main financial backer for the financing of the Lebanese armed forces and the reconstruction of southern Lebanon. In recent years, Qatar has provided the Lebanese army with tens of millions of dollars annually in fuel and salaries. But Qatari financing is likely to provoke anger in Israel. In the years leading up to the October 7 attacks, millions of dollars were sent from Qatar every month, with Israel's consent, to support the Hamas government in Gaza. Last month, the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, spoke on the phone with US President Joe Biden. At the same time, the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, met in person with Secretary of State Antony Blinken and French President Emmanuel Macron. The mediating powers believe that any proposal cannot look like a US-Israeli dictate, and therefore an Arab country must play a central role. At the same time, the mediators understand that the Saudis and Emiratis are not interested in supporting such projects. The mediators also find the terms of the peace agreement between Israel and Hezbollah quite clear. The challenge is how to create a process that will allow indirect negotiations to move forward to reach this agreement. Hezbollah continues to say that it will not stop firing on Israel until the IDF operation in Gaza ends. However, the mediating countries believe that a temporary ceasefire between Hamas and Israel would be enough for Hezbollah to stop its attacks. Meanwhile, Israel is adamant that any agreement should not include a clear link between the Gaza and Lebanon fronts. In addition, Iran has warned its proxy Hezbollah not to give Israel a reason to launch a full-scale war on the Israeli-Lebanese border. This is because Iran fears that it would jeopardize the gains it believes it has made in the region. Earlier this month, Iranian officials met with their Hezbollah counterparts in Lebanon, a Hezbollah member told the newspaper. At this meeting, Iranian officials praised Hezbollah's ongoing attacks on northern Israel. However, Iranian officials warned of escalation to all-out war. According to the report, Tehran believes that its allies in the axis of resistance have been victorious since October 7th by restricting normalization efforts between Israel and Saudi Arabia. In a report, Tehran pointed out that Netanyahu is now cornered. Do not give him a way out. Iranian representatives also told Hezbollah officials, let's not give Netanyahu the advantage of starting a wider war because that would make him the winner. Since October 8th, Hezbollah-led forces have been attacking Israeli communities and military outposts along the border on an almost daily basis. The group says all its attacks since the beginning of the war have been in support of Gaza. In the fighting, neither side has used all its capabilities to prevent an all-out war. So far, clashes along the border have resulted in the deaths of 6 civilians on the Israeli side and 10 IDF soldiers and reservists. There have also been numerous attacks from Syria without any injuries. Hezbollah has named 206 members, mostly in Lebanon, some of whom were liquidated by Israel during the ongoing conflict in Syria. In Lebanon, 32 agents of other aggressor groups, 1 Lebanese soldier, and at least 30 civilians, including 3 journalists, were killed. The fighting has also displaced tens of thousands of people in the border areas of each country. The civilian population has suffered the most. Israel has warned that it will no longer tolerate Hezbollah's presence along the Lebanese border. Senior officials favored a diplomatic solution, but warned of a full-scale attack. If efforts to reach an agreement fail, a large-scale military campaign could ensue. Now, Hezbollah has said it will only stop its attacks if a full ceasefire is reached in Gaza. Netanyahu, however, said that Hamas had made no concessions for a ceasefire and would continue its attacks. Lebanese and Iraqi officials reported that Tehran has sent diplomats and senior military officials to meet with members of other proxy forces to try to contain attacks on US troops in the region. Numerous Iranian and Iraqi sources said one such visit included Esmail Qaani, commander of Iran's elite Quds force, who arrived in Baghdad last month and convinced groups loyal to Tehran to stop attacks on US forces. Since February 4th, there have been no attacks on US forces in Iraq and Syria. In the 2 weeks before Qaani's visit, there were more than 20 attacks. This is part of a surge in violence by groups opposed to Israel's war against Hamas. This stagnation may be the result of Iranian influence. An Iraqi official with links to Iran's proxy militias said that Iran is doing everything it can to prevent the war from spreading and the escalation from reaching a point of no return. An unnamed US official commented, Iran may have realized that allowing its proxies to launch unlimited attacks on the United States and coalition forces does not serve its interests. Qaani met with representatives of several armed groups at Baghdad airport on January 29th, less than 48 hours after Washington blamed the groups for the deaths of 3 US soldiers at the Tower 22 outpost in Jordan. Following the deadly drone strike, the US responded with a wave of strikes against Iran-linked targets in Iraq and Syria. The sources said that Qaani told the groups that taking American blood risked a severe backlash, including attacks on top US commanders, destruction of important infrastructure, and even direct retaliation against Iran. All but one of the groups immediately agreed to Qaani's request, and the next day, Kataib Hezbollah announced it was suspending attacks. Nujaba, a smaller but very active group, announced that it would resume attacks, arguing that US forces would only leave by force. Although the attacks continue, we can see that neither side wants a violent war. Meanwhile, Amnesty International issued a statement today calling for an end to Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories, calling it a brutal system of control. The statement comes at a time when the International Court of Justice is hearing a case on the legality of Israel's decades-long occupation. Amnesty International also criticized Israel's de facto annexation of the West Bank through settlement expansion. Amnesty International. Secretary-General Agnes Kalamar said countries should examine their ties with Israel and call for an end to the occupation. Kalamard continued, Israel's occupation of Palestine is one of the longest and deadliest military occupations in the world. It is characterized by decades of widespread and systematic human rights violations against Palestinians. The occupation has also enabled and entrenched the apartheid system that Israel imposes on all Palestinians. Thank you for tuning in.